Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, from Google Ads to NFL sponsorships, colleges throw billions at marketing themselves to attract students. A great article by Jon Marcus of the Hechinger Report. Our question from a listener is, why would Connecticut College tell a 3.9 student who submitted a 1320 SAT score that they will admit the student if the student will switch to test optional? That's part 2 of 2. Our interview was with Lynda Doepker, a parent and podcast listener from Missouri, who shares how parents can use social media to find out what the experience of a college will be like if their child attends that respective college. And our college spotlight comes to you from Sewanee, Tennessee, and it's Sewanee, the University of the South, and that's part 2 of 2.
Yes. And you have to check out part 2 of my debate with Lisa. She's quite formidable in the question section. But for our announcements, so YCBK Plus is up. Your College Bound Kid Plus is up. This is our quarterly deep dive. I don't know if I want to call it a white paper, but we go really, really deep on a topic, and it's delivered directly into your email box, completely free. All you need to do is sign up is just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com. Go to the right side of the page, halfway down. You can't miss it. All we ask for is your first name, your email, and your state or your country. First one will be going out in late March, and we're going to see where this goes. I think this is exciting. We didn't really want to go to a full-blown blog. We're starting out with this. If it goes extremely well, who knows how we might change it down the road, whether we would go to 6 times a year as opposed to 4, whether we would ever take any proposals by other people other than us. These are all things that we can discuss internally and kind of see where it goes. Like to try things and see if you guys like them. If you like them, we stick with them and try to improve them and expand them. But we're kind of excited about this. Hopefully you'll sign up. Just yourcollegeboundkid.com. Right side of the page. Can't miss it. Your College Bound Kid Plus. All right, Dave, admissions tip. So
Yes.
A lot of people are concerned about the cost of college, as they should be. And the college model assumes that the student and the parent will both contribute to the cost. And my tip is that students learn to do something creative and develop a side hustle, because there's a lot of opportunities out there to make triple or even more than minimum wage with the creative side hustle. So what are some examples? Well, my daughter Joy, she's in grad school, but she makes almost $600 a week as a nanny. She doesn't live with the family. She has her own apartment. But does it in the day and then goes to classes and makes, cool almost $2,400, $2,500 a month. Another student I'm working with is going to make $2,000 this month selling jewelry. Other great side hustles I've seen, students doing nails, doing hair. One student I worked with, he went through a course and learned how to replace glass on cell phones. And he made a boatload replacing glass when people would break and drop their cell phones. Others make money doing Uber and Lyft. One student I knew made $600 a week doing Lyft. Now, that was a lot of hours. She was doing over 30 hours a week. But still, you don't have to do that much. Others I've seen, this is a pretty big investment, but they've actually gotten homes and done Airbnb rentals. I've seen students do modeling. I've even seen students make good money waiting and serving at high-end restaurants. So there's a lot of ways you could make double, triple, and quadruple, the money that you make with a minimum wage job. Another one started doing drop shipping on Amazon and made a bunch of money. So those are just a few tips, a few creative ways, rather than just go for like the cafeteria job or, some of the easy jobs that might pay you minimum wage. You can go for something creative and make a little bit more money. All right, Dave. Admissions vernacular. The word is cancel or canceled. What is cancel or canceled?
Ooh, well, that word is used a lot in terms of
I know where you're going.
Culture. I don't know. Is that related or canceled? Can I take a stab at that?
Yeah,
Maybe
take a stab.
All right. Well, I mean, when they say canceled now, it usually means that, you said something to offend somebody, and as a result, you're being X'd out of society somehow, dropped from a job, dropped from a web
So this is in the
dropped from a
context of
server.
admissions officers using this language, if that's any, I don't know if that helps or not.
Well, that means you've been denied, or they're not considering you because they just don't like you.
I don't know if I should give you credit for guessing your way into that one when I know you don't know what it really means. But here's the deal. So this is a term, I see this used most frequently in the UCs, especially the UC admission directors. This seems to be the preferred term. In the UCs, of course, you may remember this, students actually do not submit their 12th grades at the time of evaluation. And so they're making initial decisions exclusively off of, grades through 11th grade. And a lot of schools do that. But more selective schools like those are, at the end of the year, if they see grades that are very different from what they saw when they were submitted, they cancel you, which means they rescind their offer. So it's another word for rescinding an acceptance. Normally because grades fall, but it could also be because of other things like UGA rescinded or canceled a student because they showed up in a local newspaper because they got busted for shoplifting. Not a good look.
Yes, all these euphemisms. Well, kids, if anybody ever cancels you, just go to them and say, well, bless your heart.
Don't try giving them a lecture on cancel culture. You'll be doing that all the time while you're looking to go somewhere to another school because it's not what we're talking about here.
Well, my daughter says I'm so unwoke that if I had a Twitter account, I'd be quickly canceled. So there you go.
She's probably right.
That's right.
All right, the big number. And the big number, I'm stealing a little bit of Dave's thunder, but it'll tease out our article today. Western governors spent $127 million, according to 2019 tax records, on advertising and marketing. And if that wasn't a lot, Southern New Hampshire, $144 million in advertising and promotion. Of course, these are two of the powerhouse online schools in the country. And if you think, well, that's only the online schools. Well, Johns Hopkins, NYU, UPenn, Northwestern all spent between $25 and $30 million in promotion. And that's what we're going to talk about. So that's a good segue, Dave, for you to take our article away.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Yes, and the article is from Jon Marcus at the Hechinger Report, and it's from Google Ads to NFL sponsorships. Colleges throw billions at marketing to attract students. This article starts off by highlighting U.S. Catholic University. This university was funded by Catholic bishops, and last year they had a $5 million revamp of their marketing and branding department. And the question is, why are colleges spending so much money on marketing and branding? Well, there's three reasons. Number one, decline in enrollment, which has become worse with the pandemic. Number two, an increased competition from online providers. And number three, because of increasing public skepticism about the value of colleges. For example, last year, the total number of students, in the last decade, the total number of students has declined 13%, or 2.6 million, and it's going to get worse. It's projected that there will be a 15% drop in the next decade of the number of graduating high school students. Well, the question is, and then Gallup also came out with a survey, said that the percentage of Americans who consider college to be very important fell from 70% in 2013 to 51% in 2019. And the COVID-19 shutdowns have only further damaged public confidence in higher institutions. So the question is, how much do colleges spend on marketing? Well, according to a Simpson-Scarborough survey, colleges average between $429 to $623 per enrolled student per year. That means collectively they spent $2 billion on marketing in 2018 and $2.2 billion in 2019. Now, historically, the advertising has been dominated by the for-profit universities, such as University of Phoenix and Southern New Hampshire. But in recent years, the spending by public and private nonprofits has begun to pick up significantly. Mark, you've already mentioned Southern New Hampshire had a $144 million budget in 2019, and Western Governors University had $127 million in 2019. It's soon to be eclipsed by the University of Maryland Global Campus, however, that says that starting in 2019, they are going to spend $500 million in the next 6 years for marketing. And you also mentioned that some institutions such as Johns Hopkins spend almost $30 million, and Columbia and Stanford and Georgetown each spend over $10 million a year marketing their colleges. And they even mentioned Keene University of New York that has become the official partner of the New York Jets, and they are paying a professional football team $250,000 a year for the next 3 years for the honor of having that sponsorship. So what are the criticisms about colleges spending so much money on marketing and advertising? Well, there's several. Well, number one, people feel that many of these same monies could be better spent on such things as support services. Number two, people point out that many of these, or most of these, marketing campaigns are targeted at wealthy students who can afford to pay. And when you consider that 61% of the chief marketing and communication officers are male and 93% of them are white, you can see that they don't really pay much of a homage to the idea of diversity. But what's the counter-criticism? The counter-criticism is very simple. Look, as one administrator said, it is essential to the financial health of the university that we attract people to come here. No kids means no university, means no education. And they also point out that because fewer students took the SAT and the ACT, college lists getting college lists of students is very hard to find now, and they have to spend more on marketing firms to help track and monitor prospective students. And lastly, they point out that because of student COVID, the student recruiters are unable to travel, so much of that travel money has been diverted to be used on digital media and other forms of advertising. So to wrap up, how important is marketing to these campuses? Well, you can figure that out when this statistic is very interesting. A chief marketing officer for a university can earn as much as $375,000 per year. In fact, one administrator said in 5 to 10 years, higher education marketing will look a lot like it does at GE. So I'm going to stop there, Mark, and throw it open to discussion.
Yeah, great. Let me just hit a couple points that jumped out at me, and then let's have a discussion. So one, desperate times call for desperate measures. I mean, that's a pretty significant statistic that you've seen this drop from 70% of people considering college to be very important in 2013 down to 51%, just 6 years later. And so that's one of the things that's made schools say, oh, if we always do what we've always done, we're going to always get what we've always got. And they've seen the decline in number of kids going to college, and they're seeing the decline in interest in college, and they're thinking, okay, we're going to need marketing. There's actually a quote from the article. Marketing advertising is a response to increasing public skepticism about the need to go to college in the first place, said Elizabeth Johnson. So that's first thing. Now, on the rise, Dave already recounted that really nicely, the increase in spend. So it slowed down a little bit after COVID in the peak, but then it bounced back in the first quarter, literally doubled the amount of spending of their previous quarter. Another point the article makes is it's difficult to track. It's very difficult to track because the money's actually spent all over the place. Like some of it is on athletics and fundraising. Some of it is on student recruitment, and it's not required to be disclosed. So there's been legislation that has been brought forward in Congress to try to get disclosure, but so far that legislation has gone absolutely nowhere. There's a 2020 College Affordability Act that actually would require colleges to have to report what they spend on marketing and advertising, or they would be banned from getting federal money. But so far, it's basically been almost dead on arrival. Most people haven't even heard about that. That's how little traction it's gotten so far. Now, some people are saying, well, why do the 1%ers need to do this? And they already have enough applications. Like, what in the world are they spending so much money on? Because you'll notice some of the names are the designer label names, the wealthiest schools in the country. And some of it is because, everybody in admissions always has some aspect of their student body that they want to round out. I don't care who you are. You never feel like you have the perfect ideal balanced class. So you're either targeting people that are extremely hard to attract, or you're introducing new programs. So, for example, Columbia, they have brand new degree programs, and they've been spending their money on some of their money actually on employee recruitment, as well as hospital service. Stanford spokesman said, we're putting a lot of our money into our executive education and our new hybrid grad degree programs and our 7 new grad certificate programs. So people may know Stanford, but do they know their brand new 7 new grad certificate programs? So they're spending a lot of money getting the word out on programs that are new. Now, the new Century Foundation, their progressive think tank, they've been very critical about this spending. They've said, why can't this money go to making classes smaller, lower student-to-faculty ratios, more money on financial aid? And so there is a lot of blowback that schools are getting over this. But for the most part, they're losing that battle. They're losing that discussion. Most people are not buying that. Here's a quote. It says, these advocates raise concerns about the targets of this marketing that often wealthier students who can afford to pay at least some of the tuition, as opposed to going after promising lower income students, often racial and ethnic minorities. But then it says, if you need full pay students, you're going to have to market to them, Hall said. So that's, kind of the battle that's going on there. Like, if schools need money, they're going to target people that have money. And so that's one of the reasons they're doing that. Now, one thing Dave, you touched on, I want to underscore a little bit more. What did schools do with the financial savings? Like, we all know that they decreased their travel during the pandemic, right? I always say it's expensive traveling. Hotels, rent-a-car, airlines, meals, expensive. So what did they do? Well, they put their money into digital media. And Artis Kadu, who's the CEO and a founder of a higher education marketing firm called Element 451, he said his business is more than doubled with the pandemic. What are they doing? They're setting up predictive modeling. What I'm referring to. They are using technology to track and target applicants, monitoring what pages they go to on the website, and targeting. So this is kind of how this works. So they'll be able to tell, let's say, your child is really interested in international business. Well, they can tell that you're going to international business. Maybe you're looking at curriculum or courses or something on the website. And then next thing you know, you can get a digital brochure touting the school's excellent international business program that was culled together because one of these firms saw that's where you were going, and then they're micro-targeting you in your area of interest. Increasingly, more and more schools are using Slate software to track students' engagement and developing sophisticated yield models by using predictive modeling to attempt to ascertain which of these admissible applicants is likely to enroll if we admit them. Now, one of the things the article talks about is the drastic shift that's happened in higher ed. So I know when I was in admissions, Dave, like, the M word may as well have been the F word. Like, you just didn't use it. It was really, really, really bad. And my boss actually happened to be a Harvard MBA, and even worse than that, she didn't come from education. She came directly from corporate. So this article says only 14% of people are coming straight from corporate. And so we had a lot of blowback in our admission office, and we were never trusted on this stuff. It was very, very, very difficult to do a lot of these things. And the article talks about that. It talks about the drastic shift from the B word and the M word. And so here's a quote. It's a huge turnaround when administrators were hesitant to talk about marketing, never mind throwing around terms such as earned media, brand spending, be the change. And then it profiles a couple people. Oh, here's another quote. Say the word marketing and you could hear faculty members gasp, T.R. Stroud, executive Search and assessment consultant Russell Reynolds recalled of those days. 15 years ago, it was akin to blasphemy, said Greg O'Brien, chief growth officer of enrollment consulting firm RNL, which is probably the biggest one in the country, by the way. It's huge. So, now look at the change, okay? 56% of schools have a university or chief marketing officer that serves on the executive level, and 43% of the time they report directly to the president. And so there's basically been a shift because, for the most part, people have found out that it works. And you need students and you need money. And here's a couple examples of the shift. I'll say these last few things, Dave, and then get your thoughts, because I know you kind of did on your monologue and I'm doing mine. I want to have some discussion.
No problem.
So Dan Dillon, a former senior vice president of Coke and chief marketing officer at Outback Steakhouse, he took over Arizona State. He's the one who led the whole branding campaign, Innovation Drives Us Forward. Another example is Purdue. Purdue hired Ethan Braden, who was previously the marketing director of Eli Lilly, and he came in and has a staff of 65 people that report directly to him, and 13 more hired during the pandemic, by the way. And it's estimated that another 250 employees campus-wide are in marketing and communications. And so, why are people doing this? Well, Braden is showing the ROI. He's saying, look, I got 90,000 new social media followers, a 58% increase in our social media engagement, and he was actually named 2020 Higher Ed Marketing Team of the Year by the American Marketing Association. He won Marketer of the Year. And so, it reminds me of, I used to do fundraising, and we'd hire these major gift officers. And when I was in the department, they'd get maybe about $110,000 they would get paid to go out and raise major gifts. And then we got a new boss, and she expanded the department from 6 to 26. And people were freaking out. They're like, why are you spending all this money, beefing up the admin staff? And she would say, I can bring in a new major gifts officer, pay him like 110 or 120, and they can bring in like $3 to $5 million. So why would I not just keep doing that? And that's kind of been the mindset. But then you can imagine the debate that it feels like we're perverting the, education and where things going. And then the last thing I want to close with, Dave, and then have some discussion. It ends with a prediction. It says in 5, 10, 15 years, higher education is going to look like GE, General Electric. That's according to Bill Faust, senior partner and chief officer, marketing firm Ology, who has clients under him such as Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, Rutgers, Smith, and Penn. So what are your thoughts, Dave? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a reason why people advertise, because it works. I'm thinking about insurance companies and how, Geico used a little gecko to become one of the biggest insurance companies, and now they all have their own shtick. You have the progressive insurance. I like it because we're all progressive parents, and you have, flow and so forth. And the reality is these things work. And I think that just because you're advertising your services I have a problem with it. It's not decreasing your educational quality. You're not breaking any ethical boundaries. You're not infringing on anybody's free speech. So whatever people's impression of the goals or the quality or the nature of higher education is just not affected by advertising. In fact, it's enhanced by it. You're just telling people, hey, we're out here. Here's what we're offering, and here's what we can do for you. And students are the product. They're the limited resource. You need to go after them. So I'm all for it. It makes perfect sense to me.
Well, I agree with you, but I can just tell you I still have wounds from this. Like faculty and admin coming on the education side, there is such a suspicion that you're selling out your soul. People that go into education do have a tendency to somewhat be a little anti-corporate America. And they also, a lot of times, especially on the educator side, they don't fully grasp that nonprofits are still businesses. And if you don't function as a solvent business, there'll be a word for you. You'll be closed. All right.
Yeah.
You'll be putting up a for sale sign to sell your property. And there's a lot of naivete around that. And so that's what creates this tension, because what people see, they see huge financial needs, like we need more financial aid. Why are faculty not being paid more? Why are our classes so huge? Like, can't the money go there? And there is a detachment from the fact that you have to generate revenue to be able to allocate revenue. So does that surprise you at all, Dave?
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I look at NCAA football, which to me is just marketing in disguise.
Sure.
I mean, you get national exposure. If you're in the SEC or if you're in Notre Dame that has its own network, you get national exposure every single week. And what do you see in bowl games, Mark? You see at halftime, each university is saying, oh, by the way, we just don't do football. We have an engineering, we have a political science, we have all these things that we can offer, and look at pictures of our beautiful campus. And we've seen that national championships have stunning effects on student enrollment. Look what it's done to Alabama to change.
I have to stop you for a sec, Dave. So, David Graves is over admissions at Georgia, and I love to interact with him on Twitter because he's great. He always responds. He's very transparent. I'm always interacting with him, and so of course he was up celebrating the Georgia's national championship. And I sent him a direct tweet. I said, David, I'm sure you've seen the research, of how many more applications you get when you win a national championship. So I was like, go celebrate, have fun, and then go get ready to hire 5 or 10 more staff because you're going to need it next year for your applications.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and you take a place like Alabama, where Alabama has a declining student population. What's the solution? Expand your recruitment nationally. And it's worked amazingly. So, and the article mentions, if you're a smaller liberal arts college, this is not a question of whether you should do it. You have to do it. This is your only lifeline to survival, because no one knows you're out there. If you're in a little rural community in the Northeast, you have no exposure outside of your state unless you market yourself.
Well, let me say something else about this, because I've been part of several of these big campaigns, and I know how much we paid. We paid a boatload of money to have these marketing firms come in and literally for 3 weeks, do surveys of all of our constituencies, and then come up with not only custom materials, but, slogans and all that. I've been a part of all of that. And while some people see it as like slick Madison Avenue, being a huckster, all that, manipulative, it actually does not have to be that way. Like, we intentionally worked with a firm who had the perspective of authenticity. And so their whole thing is, we are going to unearth how you are distinctively different from the competitors, and then that needs to be how you present yourself. And one of the biggest problems I see out here in colleges, and actually we're going to be talking about this, I know one of our articles talks about this coming up in the next few weeks, Dave, is everybody's trying to be the same as everybody else.
Yes.
Everybody's trying to talk about, their diversity, their individual personal attention, their career outcomes, that they generate, and on and on and on. It's like the same sort of buzz lines. And what you really want to do as a school is you want to be so unique and so distinct that people can see that you're different from all the other competitors. And too many people are afraid to do that. Too many people are afraid to step out and, first of all, go through the whole process. If you're not sure how you're different, go through the process and figure that out. How are you uniquely different within the marketplace? And then be comfortable with that. And, this could almost be a segue to next week's article, Dave, because we're talking, I just remembered it's next week we're talking about this. It's a Brennan article called The Double Standard. And this is actually what it is. I don't want to take away all the juice from that, but we'll talk about that next week. But colleges basically need to do what they want applicants to do. Be authentic and be distinct and be unique and be comfortable in your own skin. Now, what always happens is that the excesses always get all the publicity and they always distort everything and it generates everything you hear about, the excesses, and that drives the narrative. But it sounds like we're on the same page. Like you have to realize you're still a business and you have to function in a way that's going to be fiscally and financially solvent. And sometimes that means making significant investments in how to reach people.
Absolutely. So it makes perfect sense. So, and as we've mentioned before, colleges that are going to have a tough time are colleges that are not based in a city, and B, don't have a distinctive competence among other criteria. And so what better way to negate the geographic disadvantages by expanding your social media and your digital presence?
Well, and it's not only the geographic disadvantages, it's the growing skepticism of is college worth it, and especially is it worth it at this price point?
Yes, absolutely.
Like you've had a massive, titanic paradigm shift from, of course, college is worth it. I'll pay whatever price I have to pay because there's no other option but it, versus wait a minute. I'm going to take a look, and I want proof. Show me the deliverables. Let me know that I'm going to get a return on my investment. And that's forcing colleges to have to, become a lot more skillful at communicating their value proposition. And as Dave and I were talking before we came on the podcast, the value proposition doesn't always have to be money. The value proposition can be many things other than just money. Everybody immediately wants to go to the salary stuff, but there's a lot of other things. So I think we've talked about this enough, but it's an important topic, and I think it's something that I want our listeners to be aware of. You are being marketed to. Pay attention to those messages and try to discern whether or not the message matches the authentic reality. Because one of the challenges that I see is sometimes schools tell you what they feel you want to hear because they're convinced, you need to hear about our status. Because you're not going to be interested in us without our status. So there's a lot of messaging around their status, right? And how selective they are. Or you want to hear whatever, our individual personal attention and interaction that you'll get, with faculty and with students and all that. And so they trumpet things they think people want to hear rather than really, really saying who they are. And maybe in some cases, some schools need to change too, because if you don't have any distinctive signature programs that differentiate you from people who you're overlapping with, you're going to struggle.
Yes, you are. And just to tie it up, if I was a college that had a heavy focus on humanities, you know what I would do? I'd have a marketing campaign where I'd reach back and look at some of our successful alumni that were art history majors, philosophy majors, English majors, language majors, and say, look what they did with their major. And show people the possibilities of your career and your life choices if you take these majors, that they're not as limited as popular perceptions. Use them to battle the prejudices that people feel against the non-STEM fields. I think that's another ignored segment, how to push your individual majors to show their relevance to people in life and life's choices.
It makes a lot of sense. A little tip, Dave. Don't try applying for some graduate certificate program to Johns Hopkins. You pulled another John Hopkins in there and left the S off again.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they'll deny you again as a 58-year-old trying to get a certificate. They might be podcast listeners, man.
I think Johns Hopkins has to go on a little gecko campaign saying, my name is John, it's not John.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Now, Lisa and I will resume our great debate about whether Connecticut College crossed an ethical line by telling a student that they will admit the student if they withdraw their score and apply as a test optional applicant.
It's everyone says, oh, but we're test optional because we do a holistic review and we want to just get to know you as a person, and scores are just a number. But they are just a number that we want to promote.
That's true.
And we want to artificially inflate as the highest number for our school. And your test scores, I like Northeastern does this all the time. I like you. You're a great kid. We want you to come here, but you got to go to Florence first, because then we can just take your GPA and test scores right out, and nobody needs to know you're here.
Right.
So it's I don't know. It's gamesmanship.
Yeah, I cannot disagree that it's gamesmanship, and I cannot disagree that there is a ickiness to sort of how the sausage is made. What I'd like to see schools do is even be more transparent. Like, okay, this is the number. If you don't have this, we recommend you don't test it or submit it, or what some schools do, but I don't see that many really getting that public. I see them tell people like individually, I've advocated here and here. Ask us, and we'll let you know whether or not we think this will, represent you in the best light. And I know that still doesn't take the problem away, because still there is an aspect in which the school is trying to put the highest numbers out there, and I get it. But I guess I can't think of anything else that they could do, given the fact that everybody's doing this and that's how they're going to be evaluated. Like, I'm trying to, if I put myself in their shoes, let's put it this way, what could they do differently that wouldn't hurt them? And if you say just don't do it, not doing it will hurt them. And if hurt them meaning you're not going to get some kids that you want in your school, and you're trying to make your school as strong as possible. And so I don't think that's fair to ask somebody to do something that could decrease the caliber of your student body.
Honestly, I can think of a few things that might help this situation. One is, I just think that, we as college counselors, school counselors, we need to do a better job of educating students and families about how this process works, so that they are educated consumers, so that they can start looking past these test scores and look more for schools that are good fits for them, that are affordable, that are going to help launch them. And I think the other thing is a concept that you had come up with a few weeks back, is a cut score. We're either you meet this cut score or you don't. And and that's it. So we're not going to be because 1320 is not that far off from 1350. I know I'm not good at math, but it's not like it was 1100, right? It can't pull it down that much when you're talking thousands and thousands.
Yeah. Some of why there was a lot of hullabaloo about this was that 1320 is the 90th percentile already. So it's
right.
So really, so a kid's in the 90th percentile and that's not good enough for you kind of thing. And I get that. My challenge with cut scores is they don't take context into consideration, and scores are so heavily influenced by socioeconomics of the family and opportunities of the family. And so I'll just give an example, if English is not spoken at all in your home,
oh, absolutely,
you're going to have lower verbal scores. Yeah. And so that's why I don't like cut scores. So even some of the schools that are holistic that say consult with us, one of the reasons why they do that and they don't like to go to just a number is because it's kind of what the Yale admission officer said to me when she said, if I could get a 31 ACT out of Appalachia, I'd be doing a cartwheel. That's probably the highest score that we'll see from them in 5 years. But if they just publish, our average is a 34, then that's going to intimidate all those people from ever applying. Right. So that's why it even gets more complex. So if you just go to some cut score, then you don't have the ability to take context into consideration. And then that's definitely going to dissuade applicants that you want from even applying. So it really does get complicated.
Yeah, this whole thing, it kind of reminds me, when I first became a psychologist, managed care was really in place. And so these were these companies that were hired to basically, not pay for therapy sessions past a certain point. Every 8 sessions, I'd have to call up somebody that didn't know my client, didn't know me, and I'd have to justify why I would have to beg and grovel about why I got, would need to get 6 more sessions for this person. Really, they probably need 50 more sessions, because
right.
Life is complicated and life is hard and change is slow. And, eventually, it was crazy. They would do their thing. I learned very quickly which words I could say to get them to, that they would legally have to give me more sessions. And it was a big waste of time. We were all gaming each other. And eventually it collapsed because it got so expensive to manage the care that it wasn't cost effective because most people only go to 8 sessions anyway. Like no one wants to see me for the rest of their life. They're like, bye as soon as they can. So, it was just like, this kind of reminds me of this, like with the score gamesmanship, like they're putting so much effort into a goal that is meaningless and probably isn't going to, if everyone just started to de-emphasize this goal a bit, it wouldn't matter. And then they could build a better library or something with that money or do something else instead of trying to position themselves all the time, and think of ways to position themselves all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that to me, that feels pie in the sky unrealistic just because, like, how would you do that when everybody, how you can't control what another school's going to do?
This is like the thing, like, okay, yeah, we can just sit around and say, this is the way the world is and there's nothing we can do at it. I'm not going to change because, like, it's going to hurt me. But we'll never have anything change ever if we all take that attitude. Like, somebody's got to do it.
That's true.
And they could, 10 colleges could start doing it. Not everybody. They could be like the 10 fair colleges or something. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. One of the things that some schools have done is gone test blind. I've used this example before with people. The problem with test optional is it's the equivalent of you're like a new attorney that's hired by a law firm, and you come into the law firm and they say, one of the associates says, what's great about working here? We're business casual. But if you're a really good dresser, the partners will notice it.
Right.
And so now you have mixed messages. Okay. Like you're telling me, do I dress up because the partners will notice it or am I business casual? So that's the problem with one of the problems with test optional. You're clearly saying if you feel your test scores represent you well, submit them. So the public's not naive. They know you required them recently, a lot of cases. You're telling me you'll consider them if they're sent and submitted. So it's very, very hard for people to believe it. So one of the ways of addressing it is let's just go test blind and just take the whole thing off the table. But then, then there's the argument against that where schools will say that scores with grades is a better predictor of grades than just scores. And so with so much grade inflation out there, should we really lose one of the levers that it's overrated in its predictive value, but it still does have some predictive value? And is it fair for us to just disband it with that? So it's really tricky. It's really complicated. And I don't think we're going to solve it today. That's like us solving world peace or something, or like the Palestinians and the Israelis. I personally think that the idea of doing a consultation with everybody individually and making that available is a school like attempting to do something about this.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not dinging Connecticut College any more than I'm dinging other colleges. I'm dinging them less, but I'm dinging them all, because I just think, what are we doing here? Like, what kind of crazy arms race are we having? And that way Backenstadt's right. Like, soon you'll only be able to submit a 36 or 1600 because everything else will lower their scores, and there'll be like 3 people that they're taking that statistic from each year. Yeah. And then it all becomes meaningless. Then I guess testing becomes meaningless anyway at that point.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it from the standpoint of like what could they do? Sure, you could do what Reed did. Reed basically refused. For those who are not knowing, Reed refused to submit any information to U.S. News at all because they know the rankings are bogus. And so when they reached out and asked them for their data, they said, we're not giving it to you because we don't believe in your faulty metrics. And what did U.S. News do? They just pulled the data from a lot of other sources and punished them in their rankings. And then somebody did a study to show that they literally got punished for doing that. And I guess some could argue, well, they took a pure stand and they stood for principles. That's great. Somebody else could argue to what degree did that end up hurting them? And it's hard to,
Reed is doing just fine. They have a great endowment. They have wonderful students. The people who they're drawn to Reed would like that act of, I am not talking to you, U.S. News and World Report, because you're bogus, right?
There's certainly things out there that I don't have a herd mentality for. You've heard me talk about like what Whitman's doing and giving you a guarantee of what you're going to have to pay up front before you even apply. This is how much you'll pay and reveal your tax returns and everything. That's completely breaking away from everybody else. And I think that's going to actually work to their favor.
Oh,
as
sure.
they get the good
People
publicity
like
from that.
predictability. Yeah, people like it's nice. You know what you're getting. I mean, you're not going to get a surprise. You build a relationship with the staff there in the process of discussing this, so it's a lot more high touch. And we all know that high touch is like really, I think, recruits kids and families into schools.
Definitely.
But I just think like a school, let's say like WashU now that has like more money than God, like do they really need to be protecting that like admitted student profile so terribly much? People are still going to want to go there. It's still going to have all the great things that it has. You know, if it goes down by like, 10 SAT points, is that really the end of the world?
I'll speak for myself as an admission officer. That's not how I would think. So the way I would think would be, if we're losing 7 out of every 10 kids to Northwestern that we overlap with, and 7 out of every 10 to UChicago that we overlap with, I don't want to lose 9 out of every 10. Like that, like I'm trying to make my institution go forward, and part of it going forward means some of the kids, it's almost like recruiting in sports. Like, I don't want to lose some of the top kids that I feel could come in here and really, really make a difference because of the impact they've had. So they're not evaluating it by, was I full? Did I meet full enrollment? Am I still able to pay my professors? That's not how you sort of evaluate it. You're going to evaluate it like, do I feel like I'm moving forward and making more progress and getting even stronger kids than I was getting before? And strong is not necessarily defined by test scores. It can be defined as like demographic groups that you have hardly anybody of, that you feel they would add so much if they came in and they could be part of the conversation. That's how you tend to think in admissions. Like that's how you're not going to say, well, we're going to be full, we're going to be able to pay our professors, and so we're going to be fine. You're going to be like, you're either moving forward or you're moving backward at all times. You're not no one's ever staying the same. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I do think, though, that then, like, what you're doing is you're saying we define what a strong student is in a certain way, and that student is inherently smarter and more valuable to us because they have, X test score, or they have X GPA, or they've done X activity. And I bet you if, like, we look at the outcomes of all those students that we're talking about, they're going to be roughly equal. Like, there's not, I mean, again, you're defining the strength of your student body by test scores. And
see, this is how I see it. I see it as that's how the public that you...
We're going to go in a circle all night long.
That kid that you want to enroll, that's how they think or their parents think.
Right.
And if you can ignore that, and you just won't get some of the kids that you want. And it's naive to think that you will. So
what about a different marketing strategy where you specifically address that assumption and try to debunk it for people? Mm-hmm. And then you develop a relationship with people where they, even if they have high test scores, they want to go to you anyway because you seem ethical and decent and nice, and you have a great reputation from being like, such a fair school. Like, is that not valued anymore?
Well, the reason why that's challenging is you're assuming you get the opportunity to have this personal relationship with everybody. Like, people are going online, they're starting their search just off looking at numbers and determining off that kind of stuff, who they'll visit, who they won't visit, and creating pecking orders. Like, it's only the end of the chain that you get a chance to have like the 20-minute sit-down conversation.
No, but you can do a marketing campaign. You could do a social media campaign. You could put that in your info sessions online. You can put it on your website. You can reach people in a lot of different ways on a global scale.
So we put Lisa Ruff in charge.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, you're ready.
All right, come on, world.
So what change would you make?
If I were in admissions, like the head of admissions at a highly elite school, I would start talking on my website, on, all my things, all my information would be branded with the idea that we're a great school because we provide a great education.
And right. I'm talking test scores, though. Are you going to be test blind or are you going to be test optional? That's what I'm talking about.
I probably personally would be test blind because I just think these are so easily manipulated, at least in my family.
Sure.
Sure. But I would just start talking to people like, you need to look at different equations. And I'm telling you this not just because you're going to go to my school. I'm telling you this to look at all schools this way.
Sure.
Like, and I would just go with the honesty approach. I would explain, like, this is kind of the way it's done. This is a racket. We're not doing it anymore. We don't want you to penalize us for that. But, you know, we think that because if we are appealing to your better nature and giving you information, that is going to change the game. And if somebody very high up does it, then somebody else will do it.
So what if that's what you want to do, and faculty have some say? Because a lot of schools, they do. And the faculty, you know, say, no, we want test scores, you know, and so you get overruled and you don't have the ability to, so going test blind is not an option that you're given, you know, by your provost or president, whoever you report to. That's not something that's an option. So now your choices are either test required or test optional. Either like, what do you do? Just how would you handle that?
I think, you know, perhaps I would go test optional.
Okay.
But I would just admit who I wanted to. And I wouldn't ask them to withdraw the score. And I would say whatever the admitted student profile is what it is. I am not going to focus on what that number is. I'm going to focus on getting the best class of the best people. And, you know, trying to approach those people in a different way than colleges typically do. I'm not going to sell myself with status. I'm going to sell myself with quality. I'm going to sell myself with, you know, honesty. And I just have to believe so many of these schools, and you and I have visited these schools, they're all fabulous. They have so many awesome things, you know? Yeah.
You know, another interview I did this week, and our listeners will hear this coming up, was with the president of a college. And we got into talking about how much pressure do presidents feel by rankings. And not to give away all my interviews, but one of the points, you know, he makes is the pressure comes from the board of trustees, because that matters a lot to the board of trustees. And because the president answers to the board of trustees, and the president doesn't want to lose their job, then they have to be sensitive to what the board of trustees wants. And so the hard part with what you're saying is it's not necessarily consistent with how you're going to be evaluated when you do your job by the people you report to. So it's hard to just sort of say, I want to do this thing, but that's not how those who evaluate you, that's not what they want you to do. And, you know, you can just be like a maverick out there and do your own thing, but you probably won't last.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the campaign has to happen internally before it happens externally. And I mean, again, like if you've got but like this is education, okay? These are not for-profit schools. It's education. Like it's not just making widgets. You're changing lives. You're changing society. Why do we have to go down to like, but I don't want to get fired and that guy's going to have a bigger score than me? Can't people start to think of this differently? Can't the board of trustees start to think of this differently? I just think there needs to be a cognitive shift in education at this point, because otherwise it's all marketing. It's just all marketing. And then, you know, life seems to be all marketing anymore. Like it follows that trend. And I think that's going to be a problem for education in the long run.
Well, we'll let you have the last word. You know, well. I think that.
Hey, my last word is. You just took my last word. Wait, no, go ahead.
I think that you're more optimistic than I am that the public will go for that without having consequences to your institution. And that's probably where we disagree. And this can come up on other things too. You know, it can come up with. It's why schools feel pressure sometimes to have nicer dorms and why they do things like that. And some of it is it just keeping up with the Joneses and it's some myth that you buy into that you think you need to do? Or do your internal surveys show that, no, people are refusing us because they say your dorms suck and we're losing kids over that?
But I could sort of see that because you're adding quality when you improve the dorms. You're improving the quality of the students' lives on a day-to-day basis. You're not necessarily improving the quality of your school or lives on a day-to-day basis if you start, you know, doing funny things with your admitted student profile.
But it's still controversial because what you're doing is then maybe you're using adjunct professors and you're not paying them that much when you
don't even get me started on that. You will not like what I have to say about that one.
So we've already made this a two-parter when it was going to be a one-parter. So this was a good exchange. I definitely feel that most of our listeners are going to be with you on this. And if it was a debate, you would win it,
I don't know.
But I do feel a certain responsibility having done admissions to kind of sort of give the admission side. Because I feel like that is not understood. People understand their view as a consumer and they don't understand the other side. And so I feel that's part of my responsibility. But it is also how I think, too. Like, because of doing the job, I do think this way. But I also feel like, because most of the public will just think how you think. I can readily conclude that. But this is what do they say? This is like that, what's the term? Education where you bring together disparate views and have the, good.
No, I mean, and I think like, your question is interesting. Will the public accept it? But I think in other cultures, the public already does accept it. There's so many, if you go to Europe, the public already accepts so much of this, and there isn't this kind of pressure that the schools have in other countries to manipulate their numbers. I mean, I just think it's, if you make it kind of a quasi-capitalist enterprise, then like this kind of stuff is going to happen. And the question is, should we be doing that in something like education?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders has been banging the pulpit very hard trying to get some European initiatives introduced in this country, and it's a different country that thinks differently and doesn't always go for those things. But let's leave it at that. I think it was a good exchange of ideas. Hopefully our listeners liked it. I knew you were going to take that side, and I'm actually wanting you to. I would have been disappointed if you came in and agreed with me on everything, because I was hoping we could sort of have this conversation. I think it lets people think through it and sort of see things from a different lens. So I think this was good, Lisa. This, to me, is one of our favorite conversations.
Well, I can spout off.
Hopefully you're not stabbing me in your dreams over there.
Oh, God,
that evil, cruel capitalist.
No.
He sold his soul out.
You were like literally one of the kindest and least capitalist people I know. So I could never think that of you, Mark. And that's why it's even more shocking that this stuff is coming out of your mouth. But I totally understand. It's based on actual knowledge and facts. So I appreciate it.
You have a way of being so sweet, smiling, and then just put the knife in the dagger. Just
family talent. You should have met my grandma.
You got her genes.
Oh, but no, she was way better than me. You'd be crying if she was here.
That's scary. Awesome. Well, this was great. Thanks, Lisa.
All right.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
All right, friends. Hopefully you heard the first half of my interview with Lynda Doepker. Right now you'll hear part 2 where Lynda goes into more detail in terms of what she does in these Facebook groups, what they discuss, what you can learn, and how you can work in concert with your child. She has her role, or he has their role, and you have your role, and you report back. And you can all, as a family, come up with discerning the right fit for your child. So I think you're going to like it. And it's something that, it's mostly moms in these groups that's 80% of our listeners. Certainly dads are welcome to join as well. But I think it's something parents you can apply immediately to the kids, the schools your child is checking out. Listen and enjoy. So how does Sam feel about you being in these groups? Like, does she feel like, Mom, get out of my space? This is my search. Or did she see this is valuable intel when you share it with her?
Yeah, she's pretty open. We've looked at this as kind of a group effort. We all do our part. And I have told Sam I am her assistant through this. It's her life. She's got to be the one who goes there. And she will have the ultimate decision within parameters as to what school she goes to. But Mark, one of the things that I have learned is I don't know how students do it. If you are a senior in high school and you're busy with all of your classes, the homework, all the extracurriculars, and then trying to do all of this on top of it, I don't know how students get it done if they don't if they don't have help. So I've been happy to do that for her.
Hey, I'm really glad you brought that up because, I one of the things you learn when you do college counseling is you have to learn to be careful with sort of these absolute statements. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about like what's the proper role of the parent and the student, and you'll hear it sometimes defined in such limited ways. I'm working with a family this year where, the student has 5 AP classes. He's trying to make a really competitive golf team, and his time is just incredibly limited. So the mom has taken on some of the projects, not writing essays or anything like that, but some of the research and presenting some of the research, to him that you might think, well, that typically a student will do, but it's just been been an example of, prudent and effective collaboration and teamwork. And that to me is what I'm hearing here. I think this is a fantastic role for a mom in this process. And there's no doubt in my mind we're going to get, a torrent of emails from people appreciating this interview. So really, really thank you, Lynda, for being willing to come put yourself out there and go in front of the mic and the camera and share some intel.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What about safety? Is that ever something that comes up? Like, what's the surrounding area like around the campus? Have you seen conversations along those lines, and have you learned anything from any of those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, and of course, safety is top of mind for all parents. And yes, not being able to visit some of these cities, it's been a big concern. And talking to parents, and they'll tell you, it's not a big deal to take the public transportation or Uber or whatever. So willing to talk about it, and most of the times we've been reassured by parents. Haven't heard too many scary safety stories, thank goodness.
What about, I'll throw just a couple other categories, and you can let me know if you've heard any conversation around any of these. So one would be like career center, job placement, that whole process, how that works. Another would be academic supports, um, tutoring, learning differences. These are all support for students with learning differences, and then money, like, whether financial packages change or schools significantly increase their costs from one year to the next. I threw a bunch of things out there, and I wondered if any of them hit any buttons of conversations you've seen.
Yeah, the career services part of it, I do see families talking about co-ops and internships. And one of the things I've learned through these groups is right now, November is apparently a big month to be applying for summer internships, which that timeline is kind of surprising to me, not having had to go through that. So you hear a lot of talk about working with the college career centers on interviews and job fairs and the resources that are available. One mom, I remember talking about her kid just had not had time to go shopping, had no appropriate wardrobe for this. And someone recommended her to get them to the career center because they had a career closet. So those conversations are out there, and reminders to get to those job fairs and how important they can be. As far as the money goes, I haven't seen a whole lot of that just because you're already in. And so usually that by the time you're a student, that hasn't been a big topic of conversation, with the exception of housing.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because one, some schools do what's called front load the grants, meaning they give you a better package first year than other years. And then also, most schools don't commit to what you're going to pay for 4 years. There are some that say we're freezing tuition for 4 years, but that's the exception, not the norm. Most schools have meetings with their boards at some point in the year, and they figure out what their budget needs to be, and a decision comes out what tuition will be for the next year. And it could be an 8% increase, a 6, a 4, a 2, or it could freeze, and so it sounds like it's actually good that you're not hearing a lot of griping about that in there. So it sounds like that hasn't been a widespread concern.
No, no, with the possible exception of housing. And again, for schools that, we see a lot of this in like Northeastern, that's got a terrific Facebook group. Students who are looking for sublets and things like that. There's lots of conversations about housing due to so many kids going off on co-op and how that works. And that is a situation where it's really made me feel better seeing that it really does work. Kids do find a place to live and they figure it out.
I'm smiling because I have a student at Northeastern who contacted me in the last couple of weeks because she wants to stay off campus for a lot of different reasons. And her mom's not that thrilled about it. So she was trying to get me to convince her mom, you know, to do it. And anyway, it's just you brought back memories there for that specific school. So what would your advice be to a parent that's thinking, I am definitely doing this? Like, what would another way of putting it would be, what have you learned that you know now that maybe you didn't know when you started in terms of how to maximize this sort of intel?
Yeah, I think for me, we hear so much about fit is important, and so just everything that you can learn about a school. Even when you go to visit, you're usually only there for a few hours and talk to some people, but I feel like moms will really give you the real inside scoop. So a lot of what I do is listening. Like I said, a lot of it is just things that I never even knew were going to be an issue, and just kind of ask questions and what has been their experience with certain topics. Looking at engineering programs, finding that mom who has a daughter in an engineering program is wonderful for me to be able to ask what their students' experience has been like, to get just the real deal on that. So a lot of listening and trying to find people who have been in have similar students and get their experiences.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, I'm really excited about sharing this recommended resource with you today for episode 208. It's a website, and the website is called lesshighschoolstress.com. lesshighschoolstress.com. And it's a great idea. So the website was started by Steve Becker. Steve's originally from D.C., but he spent 18 years as a school counselor at a school that I'm all too familiar with, Conestoga High School in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. It's one of the schools in what we call the main line of Philadelphia, affluent, wealthy suburbs. And it was there that Steve firsthand saw the stress that so often accompanies this college admission process and begins to just take its toll on kids' self-esteem. So he decided he was going to do something about it. And what he did was he started this website. The website has resources to counteract all the noise that's out there. Think of it as being almost a corollary to the book I've recommended many times, Where You'll Go Is Not Who You'll Be, by Frank Bruni. And the subtitle of that book is An Antidote to the College Admissions Mania. And so that's what this website is all about. Steve has articles, he has resources, he has statistics that are designed to pick your verb, ramp down, tamp down, ratchet down the mania that's out there, that's taking its toll on our youth as kids feel so much pressure to go to Prestige U in order to be validated by their peers. I can't recommend it enough. It's lesshighschoolstress.com. Check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. We will now return to the final part of my interview with Lynda Doepker. Lynda, have you ever sort of found somebody that was very impressive to you? Maybe their overall knowledge or maybe their knowledge on a specific topic, like maybe, like you said, maybe a mom in engineering, and you've like privately messaged them because you wanted to ask them a few questions, but didn't necessarily want to do it in front of the whole group. And have you ever done that? And if you haven't, is your sense that people would be receptive to on a conversation off the boards?
Yeah, I have done that a few times, and I always ask in the group, do you mind if I send you a private message and just kind of go into this more and and ask those questions? And a lot of groups too will have the ability to ask a question anonymously. So if you
Mhm.
have some question that you don't necessarily want to uh, have your name or your student's name attached to. Most groups will do that, and so you can get that kind of information, but still protect your privacy.
Love it, love it, love it. So this has been awesome. Is there anything you haven't shared that you want to share before as we wind down?
I don't think so. It's just, I know so many of us are on social media anyway, and I have to admit, I forget about Instagram. I know there's lots of good information on Instagram, but I'm more comfortable with Facebook, and that's probably just my age showing through right there. So it's been terrific for me to kind of cull some of that information and share it with my students.
Well, I think I've shared this with you before, and I know you're an avid podcast listener, but the last time I checked the number of survey respondents that we had, it was the exact same number of people in their 40s and people in their 50s. And there was just like one or two in their 30s and one or two in their 60s. And so that's kind of who our audience is.
My
It's
people.
last time I checked it was 79.1% moms and in 40s and 50s. So that's the Facebook crowd.
It's
That's the
great.
Facebook crowd. So you know this, Lisa, because Lynda, because you're an avid podcast listener. Gee, I call Lisa Anika, and now you're getting the Lisa treatment. Sorry.
That's
The L's
okay.
threw me off. I always tell people, listen, I used to be so upset growing up because my father would mess up the name of my brother Norman, and I'd be like Mormon and Narc and all this stuff. And I would be like, how hard is it? There's two of us. I'm Mark, he's Norman. And then I got the biggest dose of humble pie when I do it with my own kids. So anytime I mess up with names, I say, listen, I can't get my own kids straight, so you're probably in trouble. But you know that nobody escapes without going on the hot seat. So you ready?
Sure.
This is the part you sweat over. So what's your favorite song?
Oh my gosh. I,
Told you they'd be
you,
hard.
I, I'm not a huge music
Mm-hmm.
listener. I listen to it, but I don't seek it out. So it would probably be some song from the 1970s, probably something by Queen or something like that. So
There you go.
yeah.
Awesome. I can't remember what it was, but recently I had another guest on that was a huge Queen fan. So shout out to Queen. Favorite chain restaurant?
Um, I live in a small town, and we don't have too many. And during the height of the pandemic, we got crazy for Chipotle. So we would drive 45 minutes into town to get Chipotle, and we'd eat it in our car. So probably Chipotle right now is my chain restaurant of choice.
My daughter Karis is like singing Hallelujah somewhere. We got a brand new one in our town. Anyone in Atlanta claim Atlanta, but most of us don't live in Atlanta. We live in a town called Fairburn, which is just 17 minutes from the airport. And we just got a brand new Chipotle.
I'm
And so she
jealous.
drives by it on her way to the gym, which she does 6 times a week. And so she's like literally in heaven right now with the new Chipotle. So and I'm going to say something that is going to embarrass myself, but I'm going to be honest. I've never been. And she's like, Dad, you've never been. You've got to get this burrito or this dip or this chips or whatever. And so she's already saying, I'm taking you there. So I guess I get treated.
Yeah, you should go. You should go.
Well, I told her for a date with my daughter, I can't turn that down. Of course not.
Yeah.
All right. So, scariest movie you've ever seen?
Oh gosh. I don't probably like I can remember, I don't know if it was really scary, but it scared me at the time. I watched The Omen when I was a teenager, and it definitely, I didn't sleep well that night.
Yeah, you still remember the
Yes.
experience. So, worst purchase you ever made?
Uh, I don't want to say it was my house in Michigan that
But it was your house in Michigan.
it took forever to get rid of when we moved. But that's probably the worst purchase ever. Yeah, don't buy a home right before the housing crash. Yeah.
I feel bad for a friend of mine who had a home for 16 years. It did nothing. And as soon as she sold it, we went to college together. And as soon as she sold it, it absolutely just went through the roof
Ah,
because it was over by, this is in Atlanta, the Braves moved their location. So now the house is within a mile of the Atlanta Braves. So you
um,
can just imagine. And so, yeah, that's just, I can relate. So what would be your dream vacation? Money is a complete non-issue. You can go anywhere. Where do you go?
it would. I thought a lot about vacations, Mark. Um, and it would probably be a combination of going to a city I've never been to before, and I would love to go to Asia, and Japan or China or Singapore, but coupled with some time on a beach, just a nice, quiet, white sand beach with a good book, and my family, of course.
There you go. That sounds good. That sounds good. And the last question for you, what's some college advice that you want to share to other parents that you have found helpful for yourself?
Yeah. Um, I think starting earlier than you think you need to,
Uh-huh.
and the the advice that you give about really start those planning class schedules, um,
Uh-huh.
and thankfully we did that even before we met you, and it really helped set her on a path. Um, and then I feel one of the best things that we did for our daughter was really enable her to get through standardized testing early.
Uh-huh.
And she was able to be done by early junior year. And so, on top of all this, she does not have to worry about ACT testing or SATs or any of that. So, just start earlier than you think you need to.
Yeah, most of the time people that start working with me before the either during the summer of their rising junior year or just before then, they're people that have an older sibling that has been through this process. That those are the people that do that because they've learned how much it is involved, and especially if you're looking at doing a national search and you're hoping to try to get to not maybe all your schools, but maybe a good chunk of them. That is very, very difficult because you don't want to waste a lot of time visiting places that you have no interest in. So there's going to be a research component up front before you even take the trips. And then you can't take all the trips. Obviously, you're trying not to miss school. You're trying to balance with work. You don't want to go when school is closed. And so, particularly for people that are looking at doing, a regional or national search, going outside your local state, um, it's very, very important to but put it this way, it will significantly decrease your stress and make the senior year a lot more enjoyable and rewarding. Otherwise, it's going to feel like you got two additional courses on top of your course load.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Yes.
So, Lynda, thank you. This has been awesome. And now, because so many people have heard what you've had to say, I might have to have you come back and share where Sam ends up when all is said and done, and this whole process is over, because we're going to say, where did that mom's daughter go to college? So we'll see how that fleshes out.
The waiting is the hardest part.
Oh, it's brutal.
Yeah, we're definitely discovering that, and be happy to come back anytime.
Awesome. Thanks again, Lynda. This was awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
And now it's time for our college spotlight of the week.
Friends, we will now resume the final part of our college spotlight on Sewanee, the University of the South. Another thing they have is what's called the University Farm. Mm-hmm. And they'll have summer internships that will do research projects or capstone projects. They'll have work study jobs there. And so it's a co-curricular that's got 3 greenhouses. It has a goat farm. But they make and grow their own broccoli, their own radishes, their own kale, their own spinach, their own lettuce, and all of that stuff. And of course, they serve all the food is served fresh from like their own farm that's right there that they mine. Talk a little bit about their admission process, and then I'm going to get into some stats. There's some more things that I want to say, but I'll share some of them more in the stats section. So they require a counselor recommendation and a teacher recommendation. They do a holistic review. They will accept up to 32 hours of AP credit only for 4s and 5s, IB credit for 4s or 5s, higher level, and dual enrollment. And they are a pretty big merit money school. The average merit aid award is almost $20,000, and your admission application is your merit application. So no additional application. You just automatically find out if you get accepted, what your merit award is. They've been test optional for over 10 years. That sounds familiar. We're going to go back to Conn College again.
Oh, I can't. It's too painful.
I know. We taxed the brain out of that one. They pride themselves. Each file is read at least 2 or 3 times. They have a lot of experience in their admission office. They've got 2 people with over 30 years. They've got some real vets. So college major is not really that big of a factor in their admission process. It's interdisciplinary like you get with a lot of liberal arts and science schools. They will tell you most of the applicants they see are in range. So they are really going to great lengths to trying to see who understands who they are, who wants the environment that they offer. Because this is a different kind of a school. Like this is a school where you really, really get to know your professors, and you're going to be outdoors a lot, and you're not really going to be that connected to anything close by in the way of university. I mean, like towns. Sewanee's not a college town. This is a rural school. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to be one with nature and you want to be in a community, and you'll see later, like when I do stats, like what % live on campus, it's a certain kind of community. Like they really look for who wants what we offer. And that's huge to them in their admission process. They do like you to be in touch with your admission counselor. This is one of these schools where the admission officer is really trying to be high touch and build a relationship with each applicant. They offer ED1, ED2, EA, and RD. And they take 25% ED, early decision, 50% EA, early action, only 25% RD. So my experience with schools like this is going to be a much tougher admit RD. Mm-hmm. And, they have to admit quite a few kids to get one. And so, demonstrated interest is playing a really big role there. And they're going to mostly look at the ED and EA kids. And then if you're applying RD, boy, you better, really need to show them that you're a match for what they offer. Now, Jeff Heldsenrader, who's been in the admission office for 30 years, he's really transparent about what they look for. One of the things he likes to say is they look for someone who's interested in environmental science, the outing club, or something where they can see the kid fitting in their culture. They also look for students who are really passionate about a few things and that they were really engaged when they were in high school. Now, they don't require interviews, but they do require them for homeschool students. And one thing they do, I was just talking last week, I think in my tips about when you get deferred, like make sure you follow exactly what they tell you to do. So they say, if you get deferred, call us up and we will tell you exactly why you got deferred.
Oh, wow.
So they're really transparent, and they'll let you know whether do we need to see higher grades or what we need to see from, and so I think that's pretty cool that they actually encourage you. Call us and we'll tell you exactly why we deferred you.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, let me get into some stats. So College of Arts and Sciences, 1,710 students, come from 45 states and D.C., over 80 international students in 30 countries. And then in their graduate programs that I talked about, the MFA programs, they have another 70 students from 36 states. And then in their School of Theology, they have 148 graduate students in that program, getting MDivs. It is a very big Greek school. 60% of men and 74% of women go Greek. So those numbers are high, really high. Even though it's small, it's outdoorsy, it's a very big sports school, which sometimes isn't surprising because there's not a lot to do. So come out and cheer for the teams, right?
Right.
And a lot of times in these small D3s, you'll see they don't have football, but this is Tennessee, and Tennessee is a big football state. So football is still the big sport that brings the whole community together. You know what sport they have, Elisa, that you would like? Take one guess.
Equestrian.
You got it.
They're very good at equestrian.
Oh, you knew that?
Yeah, I don't know how I knew that, but I did.
Yeah, well, you had an equestrian background. I didn't know that you knew they had it, let alone that they were good.
Well, I think when I was a kid that I did look at that when I had my giant Peterson's guide of which places had equestrian teams. It clearly wasn't a big set, piece of my admissions decision because I didn't go to, there was no.
You probably read about the dress and the makeup and said, I'm out back then too.
I don't remember, but that sounds like me.
It's so funny. You were like, yes, humming all along. Then all of a sudden I heard, I'm out. That was hilarious. Oh, it's funny. You brought back memories. I used to have the big Barron's guide. That's all I had. I had never had a single meeting with a college counselor. I just had my Barron's guide.
I think I saw my guidance counselor once during high school. It was like he had to meet with me one time. It was like 5 minutes.
Well, I never had that. It was more than me. I had a Barron's guide. That was it. Now, they've also been a tennis power. They've really done well with tennis and lacrosse as well. Mm-hmm. Students are very involved in intramurals. 67% of students either do intramurals or do the outing club. 38 majors, 44 minors, 15 special programs. They have special pre-professional programs in business, health, medicine, education, engineering, and law. Now, Sewanee has produced 26 Rhodes Scholars. So it's the fourth most of any liberal arts and science school in the country. So this is not a joke academically.
No.
Like they do attract a strong kid, and it is a very academic environment. They've had 51 Watson Scholars, 34 NCAA postgraduate scholars, and dozens of Fulbright Scholars. And their acceptance rates into grad and med schools are extremely high. So they've got a 90 to 95% acceptance rate into MBA programs, 90 to 95 in law, and 80 to 85 in medicine. And a lot of people may not know this, but the national average is 42%. Mm-hmm. Student-faculty ratio 11-1, average class size 15, 25% Episcopalian, 19% from Tennessee, but most people do come from the South. Now, this won't surprise you. 98% of students live on campus, so this is incredibly residential. $420 million endowment. Middle 50%, 1150 to 1340 on the SAT, 25 to 30 on the ACT, 67% acceptance rate. As far as diversity, 4% Black, 1% Asian, 6% Hispanic, 4% international, 3% multiracial, and 81% white. So it's a pretty white school. But it's not because their admission office wants to be 81% white. Personally, I found racial diversity recruitment is something they get very excited about and welcome. They've made a big financial investment in programs like Posse and Yes Prep in Houston to attract a diverse applicant pool. I know the experience I've had, at least for the non-white students I've had who have gone here, has been very positive. And I talked with a Yes Prep college counselor in Houston who sent a lot of people to Sewanee, much more than I have, Hispanic students in particular. And she was very pleased with how well Sewanee had served her kids.
Yeah.
Now, this is a survey I found. What political party do you associate with? 14% Republican, 36% Democrat, 21% Independent, 21% I don't care about politics. How would you describe the political beliefs on your campus as a whole? 6% progressive, very liberal, 19% liberal, 38% moderate, 28% conservative. Now, who are their overlaps? They overlap with both Rhodes in Memphis and Davidson in Charlotte, but they are more conservative than either one of those schools. And then they overlap with three other small schools, Washington and Lee, Wake Forest, and Furman. I would say they're closer politically to Wake Forest. I'd say Washington and Lee and Furman would be more conservative than so they're like somewhere in between on the political spectrum. And then their three big college overlaps are UTK, which is University of Tennessee, Knoxville, UGA, University of Georgia, and UVA. So UTK, UGA, UVA are their three big overlaps. So let me know what your thoughts are. What are you thinking over there?
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like if you're interested in kind of like a very traditional college experience, you think you're probably going to go Greek, you're going to go to the games, and you're fine with hiking and being outside. Like, I think you get a fantastic education here, maybe better than you'd get at one of those bigger schools because you're going to get so much attention. And I do think that there's just, really involved professors are going to increase learning and knowledge. And so I think it's a really great choice for somebody, with that kind of set of interests. So I feel like it could fit a lot of kids.
No, I agree. Like, there are a lot of smaller liberal arts and science schools that talk about how, like, you get to know your professors, but, like, you really get to know it's, I should talk about this. What's the kind of kid that I feel that's not good for this school? Well, one that needs more civilization around them, that doesn't just want the nature, that needs to have more choices of restaurants and museums and things like that. Like, that's just not going to be it. The outdoors is going to have to be it, your community and your teachers. Mm-hmm. I also think introverts could struggle here because it's a place that just pulls you out.
Right.
And kind of demands that you come to the social things and meeting here. And I think it would be really hard to just sort of be in your room, in your dorm room by yourself at this school. And so I think that would be a student that could struggle here. Someone that wants a lot more racial diversity. It's not very racially diverse, and that's just part of the location. I will say this. I have worked with quite a few students of color that have gone here and that have had very good experiences. And it is way more progressive than Tennessee as a state is.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just things like everybody's wearing masks and, it's not sort of that anti-mask culture. Mm-hmm. There's a tension there because of the history, but it's pretty, within Tennessee, it's considered liberal. Does that surprise you, Lisa?
No, not at all. I mean, I think most campuses are liberal, but I mean, I think when you get, that kind of intellectualism and, emphasis on the liberal arts and philosophy, you're going to have a lot of sort of like more open thinkers. So
I would agree. Yeah. So I think that's the kid that, we see that on our server all the time. Like, do not give me a remote. But then we also see the kid that is just like a pig in slop when they can canoe and can climb mountains and can fish and can backpack and then the place is really gorgeous. Like every time I'm there, I have that reaction that I have like when I met WashU or I met UChicago or I met Princeton or I met the West Campus of Duke. Like, it's like, wow, this place is stunning,
Yeah.
But I'm a sucker for Gothic architecture. It gets me every time.
Well, you know me and Gothic architecture. But, I think, it seems like this... What am I trying to say? Like, there's a way that Sewanee kind of embodies a lot of the positive values of the South because, people up north think the South and they have a completely negative connotation, but it's not like that. I mean, like having honor and being honest and
they're really big on that
and being respectful. I personally think that those kind of things really can ease a lot of social tension, just politeness.
No, I agree with that. And they do a good job. That's another thing Davidson is fantastic with. They have a big honor code, and Karis loved it. You take exams on your own, self-proctored when you want. And, you live in this community of trust, and people feel like, listen, we all have agreed to go by these rules. Now, it doesn't mean that there's never, ever an incident. But It's almost self-policed by the students. Like, they want the community where they could leave their cell phone or their laptop out there and not have to worry about it. And they sort of police each other and police the community so that they can live in that sort of mutually trustful environment.
Right.
And you're right. Everybody's so friendly. And, there's a warmth and a friendliness there. One of the best things that I can say is I've had Asian kids go here. I've had Black kids go here. I've had Latino kids go here. And they have really had very positive experiences. In fact, there was a racial incident that happened last year, and I mean, they dealt with that thing so severely, so strictly. And, sometimes people complain to me, oh, they had a racial incident there. When you have a bunch of people together, you're going to have that.
It happens everywhere.
To me, I look at how the institution handles it.
Right.
Like, I was so impressed with how they handled that. And this is not who we are. And they just dealt with it so firmly. And to them, it was like a violation of their whole honor code. Like, you betrayed us and you betrayed everybody. And it was like, I don't know. I've been impressed with the first school that's not diverse. I've been impressed with the positive experience that people of color have had that have gone there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's what I think. I think you can't just be reductionistic about all this stuff. And I think that it sounds like a really interesting hybrid kind of unique school environment. The kind that I think markets itself without pumping up the test scores.
I knew you were going to
refer to an earlier conversation.
I saw it coming.
Just saying, this is like the example of that. They have a lot that's really special about them.
They do. And I think it starts, I know I'm being redundant here, but I'm not the biggest nature person. Like my brother, he's in Colorado. He's that. But I respect it highly. And it is peaceful. Like you could just go up on. Now I do love me some mountains. I love me some mountains. I do. I love some mountains. And I love water too. Like I'm the kind of person I love to just sit in a chair on top of my mountains and look at my mountains and my water. But I'm not the one that's going to go climb Mount Rainier.
Oh well, yeah, that's tough. That's tough stuff.
Well, they have a go climb Mount Rainier trip. But I do respect that. Like there's something healthy. There's a lot of healthy living to be out there and biking. And first of all, it's physical exercise. And then you're getting in touch with nature. And I feel like they deprogram from so much how we're connected to TV and cell phones and the internet 24/7. Like I feel like they're living a different kind of life that's kind of healthy. And it's probably really conducive to thinking and reflecting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like if you go on a retreat or something like that, you're having this very separate experience from your life, but it allows you to think about things differently or make personal changes. It almost seems like the university is sort of structured that way with where it is. You could really have a transformational experience there. It just seems like the kind of place that would just so naturally produce it with all of its elements.
Every time I go, and 3 of the times I've gone, I've taken a car full of kids down there to go check it out on a tour. But I always separate myself from the group and just kind of go off and cogitate, meditate and reflect and just take the beauty in. Because I don't know, the place is gorgeous. So there we go. One more in the books.
All right.
University of the South.
I'm going to dress up and drive over there. That's my
there
plan.
You go. And friends, just so you know, Lisa will be talking about her flagship where she grows up, the University of Missouri.
Mizzou.
That'll be our next spotlight. And then after that, the next one will be UCLA, but that will be Gary Clark, the admission director himself, doing a breakdown of UCLA. And then after that will be MIT. So that's where we're going next. Missouri, UCLA. What did I say? Missouri, UCLA, MIT.
And MIT. Yeah, that's a very diverse list.
Yeah, very diverse list. And each one of those will be a 2-parter for just like this one. So awesome. See you next week, Lisa.
All right, great. Thank you.
As long as we don't debate test scores again.
Oh, I'm going to bring it up. That and Doogie Howser. So.
Oh, goodness. You too. Do you know who he is? Because you're a reader.
And I bet his test scores were exceptional.
See, you're a reader. I was thinking, maybe Lisa can support me. Maybe she doesn't know who he is. She's reading.
I love Doogie Howser. Neil Patrick Harris. Come on, he's the best. So
who's that? Is he on the show? Neil Patrick.
He is Doogie Howser. Neil Patrick.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Mark, you're not helping yourself here.
So Doogie Howser's not his real name. That's the name on the show.
Yeah, that's a fictional character.
That's why I was saying, who names their kid that thing?
Well, a fictional writer who named a fictional kid.
That's at least a little better. And let me just stop talking about this. I've got enough time.
You should just watch an episode sometime.
That's what everybody says about Seinfeld. I've never seen that ever in my life. Watch Seinfeld. Look at you. You watch that too. Everybody talks about it at work, especially in the 90s. Seinfeld this, Seinfeld that. I like this episode.
Because it addressed all topics of human existence, right? In a funny kind of way. But yeah, anyway, You're
If
missing
it
out
wasn't
some
sports for
cultural
me, it
experience.
probably wasn't going to be in front of me.
See, but then like that is like the thing where I'd be like,
Yeah.
fine. No
Who are
sports
the
for me.
Chicago Bears?
I'm
Who
in-
are the Bulls?
Yeah, get me that Doogie guy. You know.
All right, let me stop while I'm behind.
All right.
Next week in the news, the college admissions double standard by Brennan Barnard of Forbes. Our questions from a listener are, question 1, how do I know what to do on a college visit? That's from Will from Wisconsin. And question number 2, did income or financial need play into merit scholarship decisions? That comes to us from Mary Claire in Illinois. Our interview is with Gary Clark, the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at UCLA, on demystifying how waitlists work at a place like UCLA and why do we waitlist so many students. That's part 1 of 2. And our college spotlight comes to you from Missouri. It is Mizzou, the University of Missouri, part 1 of 2.
Yeah, one of our missions is to go all 50 states and get to all 50 flagships. So I think this is the first time. No, that's not true. I was going to say this is the first time we've had a Missouri school. That's not true. We've had SLU and I think WashU already, but we have not gone to Columbia and done the flagship, and we're trying to get around and hit all 50 states up. So thanks for everybody who sent in. So many of you this week sent in articles that you think would be great. One about the class action lawsuit going on. A bunch of colleges. We had about 5 people reach out on that. And so we're going to discuss that in episode 211. And also special thanks. A number of you have donated to the podcast for the first time, and it's extremely helpful. It not only helps us pay our staff and stay commercial free, but it's also personally encouraging too to know we're kind of making a difference out there. So special thanks to everybody, and you are our listening family, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Motvich. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitru. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.